This is Vivica Williams, and you're watching Head to Head. After months, years even, of negotiation, the European Union and Britain have made a draft agreement regarding Brexit, bringing it closer than ever to a conclusion. It addresses some of the economic issues under contest, but postpones other subjects for later consideration. To talk more about the international implications, we welcome to the studio Bohdan Ferens. He's a political expert and board member at the Coordination Committee at the Institute for Democracy and Social Progress. Hello, and thank you,
Hello.
Bohdan. It's nice to see you here again as one of our regulars to bring us some international context. And let's start. Everyone knows about Brexit and has followed a lot of this that's going on. There's a lot of, issues with what will be the economic status of Britain. One of the major ones that's up in the air is the border between Northern Ireland and Ireland, which will be left for consideration. So let's talk a bit more then about, I think, what we don't really hear and talk a lot about the overall. What will be the relationship between Britain and EU after Brexit? And what does Britain want, and what does the EU want?
I think that the Brexit was not so interesting topic for a few months, but now, as we see, the just upcoming news from London make this topic is more closer to not only the EU member states but to Ukraine too. I think that the situation with the Brexit is quite complicated, not only for the European Union but firstly for UK citizens, and now it's a headache not only for politicians but for ordinary people.
Well, and it's also something that is seen more and more. There's a lot of regret around it. A lot of people who don't want to express regret, who had voted for leaving, because they're seeing all of the things that are involved in it that may be lost or may have to be changed, are really coming to light at this point.
Because when you're just following this process, you can see that it's a little bit a house, because different positions, some kind of draft of the possible agreement between the EU and the UK, but no consensus inside the political elite of the UK. I want to say that no consensus inside the Conservative Party of the UK.
Right.
Different interests. That's why for Theresa May, it's really difficult question how to solve this internal conflict inside the Conservative Party, and after that, how to deal with the EU. Because for the EU, I think three main points are very important. The first point, what will be the status of EU citizens?
Right, and they've said that, and it seems that I think President Donald Tusk of the EU had said that it was he or another official that British citizens would be offered visa-free travel, a 90-day visa-free travel. That seems to be what's there.
Yeah, it's possible to achieve, but the question is concerning the working places too, because a lot of people are working in the UK, and the status of these people is quite important, especially for the Social Democrats, for Labour parties inside the institutions of the European Parliament, for example.
And the status of Britons working in the UK.
In
the EU.
Yeah,
right.
It's an open question. The second question is a question of jurisdiction of the European Court or not, especially in the frame of trade deals.
Right.
And of course, customs union, goods, Northern Ireland. That's why it will be not so easy to achieve the good results, I think, for both sides. But the better way is to have more longer this period of prolongation, I think.
Well, it seems, do you think having a longer and longer transition period is going to change the fundamental issue, or will it just harden the EU and Britain into its stances? Because it seems maybe Theresa May will lose her, will have a vote of no confidence and no longer be in charge of this process, and that could certainly change dramatically what the UK is willing to accept or not accept.
I think that for Theresa May, it's a big risk now, because we can predict that not only for the Labour biggest opposition party in the UK Parliament, but for some part of the Conservatives, they are ready for voting against the Theresa May's plan.
Well, and we can also see the number of people in her cabinet who resigned in just in 24 hours over the plan she brought home.
But at the same time, in politics, everything is possible. You know, at the same time, when Theresa May will be able to achieve some kind of positive result, maybe she could be a hero for some part of the citizens of the UK. It's the most optimistic scenario for this, but honestly, I'm not sure that it could be possible, especially in the context of upcoming elections in the European Union, because in May the European Parliament will be elected, and it will be the process of forming institutions inside the EU. That's why I think for the EU it will not be a reason to pay a lot of attention towards the Brexit.
Right, and there's been a harder stance from the EU on what Britain wants. And I understand there's a lot harder stance, is that the EU has the three aspects they want to continue to protect, which is, I think, the free movement of people, the free market, and a third of which I can't bring to mind at this moment. But many of the things that Britain wants does not quite work so well with the three things that the UK.
It's always, different sides. It's always the necessity to negotiate, and who will have the good arguments and power, of course,
and who will back down first.
Yes, back down first. The winning will be, for this side. That's why I think we will see more serious, more processes of prolongation and hard Brexit. I'm not possible. I don't think that it's possible to make the hard Brexit, as Theresa May usually saying in this context of situation.
Well, and so the hope is, the plan, as President Donald Tusk puts it, if nothing extraordinary occurs, they plan to sign they hope to sign the Brexit deal on November 25th. So that's roughly a week, it's roughly a week, or less than 10 days. So what do you think the possibility of that happening?
I'm not sure that it will be possible, especially now, as you see, because when, for example, you are preparing for the negotiations and you see that your opponent now is quite weak, because Theresa May and the government of Theresa May now is more weaker than it was previously, you will be standing more on your position.
Absolutely.
At the same time, for Theresa May, I think it's not an option now to have a deal and to lose politically and to lose in economical context for the UK. That's why I think it will be more rounds of negotiations.
And let's shift perspective at this moment and look at what this effect will have on Ukraine or Ukraine's relationship. What do you see in the context of Ukraine in the UK?
The first point is, I think, that the interest towards Ukraine will be not so as we would like to have, because we usually are waiting and are willing that the EU will focus more on the Ukrainian agenda. But now, as we realize, Brexit is one of the hottest topics, and the next upcoming election another one. That's why more internal questions for the EU, the less interest towards Ukraine, unfortunately. That's why in this regard we should focus on our home task, how we can just implement association agreement, how we can see our economical context with the UK in the perspective, because...
Well, Ukraine would be required to, or would Ukraine need to renegotiate types of trade deals or lots of different deals that it has with the EU? Would these need to be renegotiated or just agreed upon with the UK once it leaves Brexit?
It will be possible only after the final point, the final agreement, when the UK will have this agreement with the EU. Before this, we can just only to think, to analyze, but to negotiate on bilateral level, I think it's not now possible.
Do you even think that there's much would change in the relationship between the UK and Ukraine?
I don't think that it because in the context of visa-free regime, we don't have a visa-free regime with the UK because they have their own rules and we need to get the visa. That's why in this regard, no big influence on our relationships. But of course, as I mentioned, the problems inside the EU will affect Ukraine.
Absolutely.
And now is affecting us too, unfortunately.
All right, well, thank you very much for being with us today, Bohdan, and giving us a little bit more insight in the latest workings. And as they come closer to an agreement, we're going to have you back here and to give us a little bit more analysis.
Thanks a lot for the invitation.
Thank you. And that was Bohdan Ferens. He's a political expert and board member of the Coordination Committee at the Institute for Democracy and Social Progress. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned with UATV for more.